The first time Margaret Thornberry stole my firewood, I was furious. The second time she tried, those logs were full of 10,000 angry carpenter ants. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's just giving someone exactly what they're asking for with a little extra surprise inside. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The first time I saw Margaret Thornberry marching across my front lawn like she owned the place, I should have known she'd become the bane of my existence. But there I was, innocently stacking firewood on a crisp October morning, completely unaware that my peaceful suburban life was about to turn into a battlefield. "Excuse me." Her shrill voice cut through the autumn air like nails on a chalkboard. "Are you the new homeowner?" I straightened up, wiping sawdust from my hands. "That's me. Just moved in last month. I'm Jake Morrison." I extended a friendly hand, which she stared at like I was offering her a dead fish. "Margaret Thornberry, HOA president." She didn't shake my hand. Instead, she pulled out a tablet and started tapping away with manicured nails that looked sharp enough to draw blood. "I need to inform you that your wood pile is in violation of HOA regulations." My what now? I glanced back at my modest stack of oak and maple logs, neatly arranged against the side of my garage. "I'm sorry, what's the problem exactly?" Covenant 15.3b explicitly states that firewood storage must be screened from street view and cannot exceed 4 feet in height. She thrust the tablet toward me, showing some microscopic text that might as well have been written in ancient Sanskrit. "But it's not even visible from the street," I protested, gesturing toward the hedge that completely blocked the view. "And it's barely 3 feet high." Margaret's eyes narrowed. She was probably in her early 50s, with that particular Karen haircut that seemed to defy both gravity and good taste. Her lips were pursed so tight they looked like a cat's butthole, and she had the kind of artificial tan that made her look like a leather handbag with delusions of grandeur. "Mr. Morrison, I've been the HOA president for 7 years. I know a violation when I see one." She clicked her pen with the authority of someone who'd never been told no in her adult life. "You have 48 hours to relocate this debris, or face a fine." Debris? These were premium hardwood logs I'd spent my entire weekend splitting and stacking. Each piece was perfectly seasoned, ready to keep my family warm through the winter. But to Margaret, they were just debris cluttering up her perfect suburban kingdom. "Look, Mrs. Thornberry." "Miss Thornberry," she corrected with venom. "Miss Thornberry, I'm happy to work with the HOA, but this seems like a pretty minor issue. Maybe we could find a compromise." She snorted. "The rules exist for a reason, Mr. Morrison. Property values don't maintain themselves. 48 hours. With that, she click-clacked away on her ridiculous heels, leaving me standing there wondering if I'd accidentally moved into some suburban version of North Korea. That night at dinner, I told my wife Sarah about the encounter. She nearly choked on her spaghetti. She said, "What about your firewood?" Sarah laughed, but I could see the concern in her eyes. We'd sunk our life savings into this house, and the last thing we needed was HOA drama. I know it sounds crazy, but she seems serious. "Maybe I should just move the wood to the backyard." "Jake, you spent 3 weekends cutting and stacking that wood exactly where you wanted it. It's not bothering anyone, and it's not even visible from the street. Don't let some power-hungry busybody push you around." My 8-year-old daughter Emma looked up from her plate. "What's an HOA, Daddy?" "It's like having a really mean teacher who follows you home and tells you how to live in your own house, sweetheart." Emma wrinkled her nose. "That sounds dumb." "Out of the mouths of babes," Sarah muttered. I decided to stand my ground. After all, what was the worst that could happen? I found out exactly what could happen when I came home from work 2 days later to find my entire firewood stack missing. Not moved, missing. Every single log was gone, leaving only a few scattered pieces of bark and the rectangular impression in the grass where my winter fuel supply used to be. My hands shook as I called the number on the HOA violation notice that had been taped to my front door. "Thornberry Residence. Miss Thornberry, this is Jake Morrison. Someone stole my firewood." "Oh, that." Her voice was sickeningly sweet. "The HOA maintenance crew removed the violation. The wood has been disposed of according to community standards." Disposed of? My voice cracked like a teenager's. That was 3 cords of premium hardwood. Do you have any idea how much that cost me? I'm sure I wouldn't know. Perhaps next time you'll take HOA regulations more seriously. Have a lovely evening, Mr. Morrison. The line went dead. I stood there staring at my phone, a red haze of fury clouding my vision. 3 cords of wood. $600 worth of perfectly good firewood, Not to mention the dozens of hours I'd spent cutting, splitting, and stacking it. Gone. Vanished into the HOA ether like it never existed. Sarah found me sitting on the back porch 20 minutes later, still in shock. They took it all, I said numbly. Every piece. They can't just steal your property. Sarah's voice was getting that dangerous edge it got when someone messed with her family. We're calling the police. But of course it wasn't that simple. Officer Martinez was sympathetic but explained that since the HOA had the authority to remove violations, and since I'd been properly notified, there wasn't much the police could do. It was a civil matter now. You could try small claims court, he suggested. But honestly, these HOA disputes can get pretty messy. Might be easier to just comply with their rules going forward. Comply with their rules? Like I was some kind of criminal for wanting to heat my home with wood instead of jacking up my electric bill all winter. That night, I lay awake plotting revenge fantasies that ranged from mildly passive-aggressive to completely illegal. Sarah could sense my restlessness. You're not going to let this go, are you? She whispered in the dark. Would you? She was quiet for a long moment. No. But whatever you're planning, don't do anything that'll get us kicked out of the neighborhood. Emma loves her new school. The next morning, I drove to work with a head full of half-formed plans and a heart full of righteous indignation. But it wasn't until I was grabbing coffee in the break room that inspiration struck. You look like someone ran over your dog, said my colleague Dave, stirring sugar into his cup. I told him the whole story, and Dave listened with the kind of rapt attention usually reserved for true crime podcasts. Dude, that's brutal, he said when I finished. But you know what? This reminds me of something that happened to my brother-in-law up in Michigan. Dave's brother-in-law, it turned out, was a logger who'd had a similar run-in with a power-hungry property manager. The solution he'd come up with was both brilliant and diabolical. He replaced all the stolen wood with logs that looked perfect on the outside, Dave explained, grinning like the Cheshire Cat. But they were completely hollow. And he'd filled them with carpenter ants from old stumps in the woods. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. Carpenter ants? Hundreds of them. The property manager took one look at the new violation, and had his crew haul them away to the dump. But somewhere between the pickup and the disposal. Dave shrugged. Let's just say the guy's truck needed some serious pest control afterward. The beauty of it hit me like a lightning bolt. It was perfect. Completely legal. After all, I'd just be storing perfectly legitimate firewood on my own property. And if someone happened to steal that wood again, well, that wasn't my problem, was it? Dave, I said slowly, you might be a genius. I have my moments. That weekend, I drove out to my buddy Mike's property in the mountains. Mike owned 40 acres of forest land and made his living as a tree service contractor. More importantly, he had access to all the hollow, ant-infested logs a vengeful homeowner could ever want. You want me to do what now? Mike asked, scratching his beard. I explained the situation, and Mike's expression slowly shifted from confusion to amusement to outright glee. Jake, my friend, you've come to the right place. He gestured toward a pile of logs near his workshop. See those beauties? Oak and maple just like you had before. Looks solid as a rock from the outside. I walked over to examine them. They did look perfect, thick, well-aged logs that any reasonable person would assume were excellent firewood. Mike picked up a stick and tapped one of them. It made a hollow thunk sound. Carpenter ants been working on these for about 2 years, Mike explained. They've eaten out the entire interior, but they left the outside shell intact. It's like nature's own Trojan horse. And the ants are still in there? Mike grinned and grabbed a small axe. With one quick chop, he split open the end of a log. Immediately, hundreds of black ants came pouring out, scurrying in every direction. Oh yeah, they're in there all right. Whole colonies of them. You move these logs, you're basically relocating an entire ant metropolis. Perfect. Mike helped me load 3 cords worth of hollow logs into my pickup truck. From the outside, they looked identical to my original firewood. Maybe even better, since Mike had selected the most pristine-looking specimens from his collection. Now, you didn't get these from me, Mike said with a wink as I handed him a couple $100 for his trouble. But hypothetically, if someone were to move these logs around a lot, those ants might get a little agitated. Hypothetically, I agreed. The drive home was nerve-wracking. Every bump in the road made me imagine thousands of angry ants escaping their wooden prisons and turning my truck into a biblical plague. But the logs held together and I made it back to my house without incident. Stacking the hollow logs was like defusing a bomb while juggling chainsaws. I had to be incredibly careful not to jostle them too much, lest I accidentally release the ant armies in my own yard. But eventually, I had them arranged in the exact same spot where my original firewood had been, looking absolutely perfect. The trap was set. I didn't have to wait long. Monday morning, I was barely out of my driveway when I spotted Margaret's silver BMW prowling the neighborhood like a shark looking for violations. By the time I got home from work, there was another notice taped to my door. This one was even more aggressive than the first. Apparently, my flagrant disregard for community standards and repeated violations meant I was now facing a $500 fine in addition to the removal of my debris pile. But the best part was the handwritten note at the bottom. Final warning. Removal scheduled for Wednesday morning. No exceptions. Thornberry. Wednesday morning I called in sick to work. Not completely a lie, I was definitely sick of Margaret Thornberry's bullshit. I positioned myself at the front window with a cup of coffee and my phone, ready to document whatever was about to unfold. At exactly 9 a.m., a white pickup truck pulled up in front of my house. Two guys in work clothes got out, followed by Margaret herself, dressed like she was about to inspect the troops. She pointed at my woodpile and barked some orders I couldn't hear through the window. The workers looked less than thrilled about their assignment, but they started loading the hollow logs into their truck bed. I had to admire their efficiency. It only took about 20 minutes to load 3 cords of wood. Of course, they had no idea they were essentially kidnapping several thousand ants in the process. Margaret stood there supervising the entire operation, her arms crossed and her face set in its default expression of perpetual disapproval. As the last log went into the truck, she actually smiled. It was probably the first genuine expression of joy I'd ever seen on her face. The workers climbed back into the cab and Margaret got into her BMW. I watched the little convoy pull away and I have to admit, I felt a tiny pang of guilt. It lasted about 3 seconds. My phone rang an hour later. "Jake, you need to get down to the community center right now." It was my neighbor Tom and he sounded like he was trying not to laugh. "You're not going to believe what's happening." I grabbed my keys and drove the 6 blocks to the community center, which also served as HOA headquarters. There was quite a crowd gathered in the parking lot, all staring at something near the dumpsters. The white pickup truck was parked at an odd angle, both doors flung wide open. One of the workers was standing about 20 feet away, frantically brushing at his clothes and doing what could only be described as the angry ant dance. His partner was hosing himself down with a garden hose they'd apparently found somewhere. But the real show was Margaret. She was standing next to her BMW, which was also parked at a strange angle with all 4 doors open. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her blouse was half untucked, and she was swatting at the air around her head like she was fighting off invisible demons. "Get them off me," she shrieked. "Get them off." That's when I noticed the ants. They were everywhere, streaming out of the truck bed, marching across the parking lot, and apparently, exploring the interior of Margaret's BMW. The hollow logs had split open during transport, releasing their angry inhabitants into an enclosed space with 3 very unhappy humans. Tom appeared at my elbow, grinning from ear to ear. "Best entertainment we've had in this neighborhood since the Hendersons' divorce," he whispered. One of the workers spotted Margaret and started yelling. "Lady, I told you something was wrong with those logs. They felt too light and I could hear something moving around inside them." "You didn't say anything about ants." Margaret shot back, still dancing around her car. "I said something was moving. What did you think it was? Tiny construction workers." The absurdity of the situation was too much. I started laughing and once I started I couldn't stop. Tom joined in and soon half the crowd was cracking up at the sight of the HOA dictator being brought low by a bunch of carpenter ants. Margaret finally noticed the growing audience and tried to compose herself. But it's hard to maintain your dignity when there are ants crawling out of your designer handbag. "This is sabotage," she declared, pointing a shaking finger in my general direction. "That man deliberately." "Deliberately what?" I stepped forward, still grinning. "Stored firewood on my own property? You're the one who had it removed, Miss Thornberry. I had nothing to do with your pest problem." She opened her mouth to argue, but another ant apparently chose that moment to explore her ear canal. The shriek that followed could probably be heard from space. The pest control company took 3 hours to clear all the ants out of Margaret's car. The HOA had to pay for the service, plus the cost of having the vehicle professionally detailed. The pickup truck needed similar treatment, and the 2 workers refused to finish their shift, demanding hazard pay for dealing with what they termed biological warfare. But the real victory came 2 weeks later, when I received a letter from the HOA board. It seemed that several other residents had filed complaints about Margaret's aggressive enforcement tactics and abuse of authority. The letter informed me that my firewood storage was no longer considered a violation, and that all fines associated with the issue had been rescinded. The letter was signed by the new interim HOA president, a retired teacher named Mrs. Chin who actually seemed to understand the concept of reasonableness. Margaret, apparently, had resigned from the board to pursue other interests. Rumor had it she was moving to a condo in Florida, where she could terrorize a whole new community of unsuspecting homeowners. I celebrated by buying another 3 cords of firewood, real firewood this time, and stacking it in exactly the same spot. But I kept a few of Mike's hollow logs in my garage, just in case any future HOA tyrants decided to mess with my property. The best part came that evening when Emma asked about all the commotion at the community center. Did the mean lady really get attacked by ants, Daddy? Well, sweetie, sometimes when people take things that don't belong to them, they get more than they bargained for. Emma thought about this for a moment. Like karma? Exactly like karma, baby girl. Exactly like karma. Sarah squeezed my hand under the dinner table. So what did you learn from all this? That carpenter ants are excellent judges of character? She laughed. No, seriously. I thought about it for a moment. I learned that sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Or in this case, fight theft with ants. But mostly, I learned that bullies come in all shapes and sizes, and sometimes the best way to deal with them is to give them exactly what they're asking for. And what was Margaret asking for? She wanted my firewood removed. I just made sure she got a little something extra in the bargain. The truth is, I didn't feel guilty about what happened to Margaret. She'd stolen my property, cost me hundreds of dollars, and done it all with a smile on her face. The ants were just nature's way of balancing the scales. Besides, I never actually told the ants to go after her. I just stored some perfectly legal firewood on my own property. If she chose to steal that wood again, and if that would happen to contain several thousand tiny roommates, well, that was her choice and her consequence. Sometimes justice comes from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from karma. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, it comes from a truck full of angry carpenter ants who are just as tired of being pushed around as you are. Margaret never did come back to complain about my firewood. In fact, I haven't seen her in the neighborhood since the great ant incident of last October. Mrs. Chen, on the other hand, stopped by a few weeks later to welcome me properly to the community. Nice firewood, she said, admiring my perfectly legal stack. Very well organized. Thank you. I take a lot of pride in my woodpile. She smiled. I can tell. You know, the previous HOA president left quite suddenly. Something about an insect phobia, I heard. Really? That's too bad. I hope she finds somewhere more suitable to her needs. I'm sure she will. By the way, I wanted you to know that the board has revised several of our more restrictive policies. We believe homeowners should be able to enjoy their property within reason. That sounds very reasonable, Mrs. Chin. Please call me Linda. And Mr. Morrison? If you ever have any concerns about HOA policies, please don't hesitate to reach out. We believe in communication over confrontation. After she left, I sat on my front porch, looking out at my perfectly legal firewood stack and feeling genuinely content for the first time since moving to the neighborhood. The late afternoon sun was filtering through the trees, and I could hear Emma playing in the backyard with the neighbor kids. This was what I'd wanted when we bought the house. A peaceful place to raise my family, where we could enjoy simple pleasures like a warm fire on a cold night. Thanks to a few thousand carpenter ants and one very unhappy former HOA president, that's exactly what we had. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just giving someone exactly what they think they want, and letting natural consequences take care of the rest. And if those natural consequences happen to have 6 legs and a serious attitude problem, well, that's just Mother Nature's sense of humor at work. Margaret Thornberry wanted my firewood gone? Mission accomplished. She just got a little more than she bargained for in the process. As I sat there watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I couldn't help but smile. Tomorrow I'd split some more wood, maybe organize my garage, and definitely enjoy another peaceful evening in my ant-free home. After all, there's nothing quite like the satisfaction of a job well done, especially when that job involves outwitting a neighborhood tyrant with nothing more than hollow logs and the patience to let karma do its work. The firewood was gone, Margaret was gone, and the ants had found new homes somewhere in the great outdoors where they belonged. Everyone got exactly what they deserved. And in the end, isn't that what justice is really all about?